Yeah, there's a note taker here, Otter AI.
Here we go. We are with David Dodd. You don't get many opportunities to get a biotech CEO on. Um, David, thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
Before we get into the company, because we do have quite a few questions for it, myself and Chris are fairly well prepared, I would say. Um,
Speak for yourself, Dan.
Maybe more so than others, Chris. You might have the questions in your email. Um, but David, how does one go about selecting a CRO for a clinical trial? Because that's got to be one of the hardest things I think as a biotech CEO of like all these CROs claim to do the same thing and ultimately very few of them deliver. What what is your thought? What are your thoughts on these?
Sure. It's something that, we spend obviously a lot of time doing because we have three products, two of which are vaccines, one is a cancer therapy, all advancing either in phase two or they're advancing into a pivotal trial, that type of thing. Obviously, in each case, we need CROs because we have an internal medical clinical team with experience. We have a director of clinical operations who has significant experience managing CROs, in different pharmaceutical companies. And our areas of expertise in terms of knowledge base therapeutically are either in oncology, where we have an oncologist on staff, or in infectious disease vaccines. And there again, we have someone who's an expert in infectious disease vaccines and dealing with the whole area of infectious disease care. And so from that stand, and they've all been involved in many different selections of CROs over their careers and all. For me, it's actually not a big deal because I delegate. It's their job. I don't get involved. I sign off when they make the decision of the CRO. They will brief, they brief myself and the other members of our leadership team on why they're recommending a particular CRO and that type of thing. And we obviously review the contract, those things. But it really is their responsibility, and then we look very closely at the performance and whatever history we may have had with them. And in one particular instance, we didn't have to do anything because the HHS BARDA selected the CRO. We had a CRO in our proposal, and we received this award last summer. Is valued at $400 million in terms of a major phase 2B study, 10,000 patients, comparing our next generation COVID-19 vaccine to the Moderna vaccine. And in that one, the government is funding on our behalf directly the CRO, but it's the CRO that we had in our proposal. So we went through usually the process of putting an RFP together. Within that RFP, we want to know what is the experience in the particular therapeutic area, that we're talking about. If someone pitches for it and they say we've never done vaccines or we don't haven't done oncology and we're pitching for our Gedeptin in oncology, then that's a disqualifier, right away. So we look at their experience. We always
Chris is
ask.
licking his chops. Like,
Oh,
Chris, as somebody who maybe own a CRA, I'm asking for a friend, CRO, how do you pitch a biotech CEO properly? First of all, do you welcome cold email pitches, or would you prefer they meet you at a conference, or what's the best way? And maybe if you want to share like which CROs you're using, if you're allowed to disclose that.
I thought that was for Chris. Is that for Chris or for
Uh,
me?
No, that's for
that's
you,
a
David.
Oh,
preemptive
okay,
one for
okay, sure.
Chris.
Well, it's all the above. We meet CROs. Well, first of all, there's so many every day. There are incoming emails of introductions of CROs, as you're well aware. So they're always marketing themselves. Every conference which we attend, uh, is inundated with CROs. If you go to Biotech Showcase in San Francisco in the early part of January, tied in with the JP Morgan conference, seems like the majority of the stands, if you want to call them that, or kiosks, are from CROs. And so there are lots of them. We go to the World Vaccine Congress, pardon me, and there are CROs from all over the world there. We attend the World Vaccine Congress Europe. That's always in the fall. Again, it's inundated with CROs. Bio Europe, which is both in the spring, it'll be coming up week after next, and then also in the fall. That one is heavily inundated, heavily represented by CROs. So we meet with them. We usually, if we're not in the market to select a CRO, usually when we're registering, because you do the one-on-ones or scheduling stuff, we put in there we're not interested in meetings with CDMOs because we have our
Ah,
contract manufacturing partners already in place. We work with two, and we say we're not interested in any CROs. So we tell them right up front, if you reach out to us, we're just going to decline a meeting because of me.
report
And
as spam.
yeah, exactly. And so we do that. We've worked previously, we've been working with Elucent, which is the combination of the former SMS, Cato, and Pharmalon. So SMS, Cato was more in oncology. Pharmalon was more infectious diseases. We've worked with them in infectious diseases. We're Ergomed, we've worked with. They have a strong experience in oncology as well as other areas. I have a history of working with Ergomed, both in a large, very large pivotal phase 3 trial historically, as well as in a pivotal trial that led the product registration in endocrinology. Again, my role in that was my clinical team was looking for some introductions in oncology, and I said you may want to look at this company Ergomed. I said I know their founder. Haven't talked to him in several years, but worked with them in oncology before, and this was for an oncology trial, and so I left it up to them from their own. And as it proceeded, I learned that that was their preferred, recommended one. So that's how we do. We meet them in many different ways, but conferences are a lead area, or I'll call it the traditional networking, where someone will say, have who, someone on our team may say, I've worked with so and so before. And so from that standpoint, as I said, we have a director of clinical operation that her job is to manage the CROs with whom we work.
I see. And that person reports directly to you, or is there
No,
another?
no, no. That person reports into our chief medical officer.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
So, we received some talking points from probably one of your reps. So I'm actually curious. We hear about monkeypox off and on, and I believe there is some research being done in that realm by your company. Um, can you speak to the prevalence on monkeypox and what you're pursuing at this point?
Sure, sure, happy to, and thank you. Um, and we all started learning really about monkeypox in 2022 when we had
Mm-hmm.
the spring outbreak, and it was a huge issue. And then again this past August, WHO with a new strain that is rampant and continues to be rampant in Africa, but it's now already spread, and we're having increasing reports in the U.S. and North America. It's in Europe now. In fact, I'll be doing a webinar this Thursday on MPox because after 2022, WHO decided we were offending monkeys, so we now call it MPox. We're not supposed to call it monkeypox
Wait,
anymore.
wait. Hold on. Monkeys
Are
are
offended
offended by podcasts or by
Well,
webinars? Which
yeah,
by
one?
the
so
name
I'm
monkeypox.
just saying it was always called monkeypox, but after the 2022 outbreak, we were all informed it's now called MPox. So what most people say, and we comment it this way, is MPox, formerly known as monkeypox. So, so yeah,
Formerly, no.
so
I don't know. I don't know why we have to worry about offending
At
monkeys,
least
but
it's not like Prince that became a symbol instead of a
I
name.
know.
I mean, maybe
So
that's next.
just yeah, just to the key point is just last week. Thursday, the WHO issued the third, what they call Declaration of MPox as a public health emergency of international concern, PHEIC. That's the highest level of a public health declaration that WHO makes. And it was the third such declaration on MPox since the first one was done last August. It was then reiterated in November, and it's become an increasingly beyond Africa situation now that they issued this past Thursday. So it's a big deal. Now you may say, well, I don't know anybody, and it's just now getting into the U.S. Uh, we recently met with the person at the WHO out of Geneva who oversees that all their MPox programs, et cetera, and other healthcare emergency programs for infectious disease. And her direction to us was keep doing what you're doing, advancing your vaccine because it's not going away. It's only going to get much worse. So here's the thing, there's one vaccine that's authorized in the world and it's recommended by WHO and the CDC. So from one supplier that is been demonstrated and is approved for preventing mpox. It's the same vaccine that prevents smallpox because they're both part of what they call the pox virus family. And that's from a single supplier out of Denmark. We plan to be the second such supplier. And the reason why is we have the same product that they have. We actually use it as the basis for all of our vaccines, all of our infectious disease vaccines. So it's a vaccine. It's the vaccine that enabled the world to rid smallpox going back to the 1970s. That was when the WHO declared that we've rid the world of smallpox. That was in 1977.
So, real quick, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm curious. Can you expand my knowledge base? To my understanding, smallpox was deadly. I don't remember the death rate, but it was fairly significant. Maybe 10% could have been higher.
Um,
I don't believe there's any real life-threatening concerns with mpox. Am I
well, there
wrong?
actually is. It's a good question. So the strain that came out in 2022,
Hmm.
so 2.5 years ago, it was in the spring of 2022.
Now, again, I'm sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. Um, to my understanding, monkeypox is more of a visual thing. Obviously, if you're kind of vain, you're definitely going to be concerned about monkeypox because it's kind of nasty looking blisters and things of
And,
that
you're
nature.
not true.
Not
Uh,
true. Okay.
Strain, the one that was out 2 years ago, almost three now, had about a 1% was what it was estimated fatality rate. The current one is as high. Well, it was originally estimated at 10%, but I'm going to say it's between 3 and 7% now.
Oh,
So it's much deadlier. It not only just it doesn't just temporary, it scars people for life. They get blinded because you get those pustules in your eyes and you're blind. So it's concerned because it's much more, it's a factor of at least 5 times the fatality rate that you saw of the one that came in the spring of 2022. So there's a real concern. There have been over 60,000 cases in the Democratic Republic of the Congo over the last year alone, over almost 1,500 deaths. And over about 80% of those have been among children because children have never been vaccinated against smallpox
mm.
because we quit giving the vaccine because the world supposedly was rid of smallpox. But since mpox is so related to that, and the same vaccine is utilized to prevent that, then that's why these children are so exposed to it. Also, the current strain, the first strain was primarily transmitted from sexual contact, largely men having sex with men and then transmitting it to someone. The current strain is actually transmitted much more casually. If a child sleeps in a bed where some adult who may have the virus slept in, they can pick it up from sheets, they can pick it up from pillows. So that's why it's migrated now beyond Africa. There are reports in Europe, reports in North America, increasingly more and more states. I think it's 4, 5, or 6 states now in the U.S. have reported mpox cases. Almost in all instances, it's because people who have traveled from that region in Africa have brought it with them. And
Hmm.
so it's a major concern, which is why just last Thursday the WHO reiterated it because they had an emergency meeting because it's been devastating Africa especially. They need 25 million doses of the vaccine in Africa, and the most that can be produced because the single supplier in the world today of that vaccine has a very limited manufacturing capability, and they can provide maybe 2 to 5 million doses in 2025, and Africa needs 25 million right now. And that's where GeoVax comes in because we saw the opportunity because we have the same vaccine that is currently authorized and utilized by again a monopoly player. And so we started, especially last year, we put a big focus on advancing ours, and we've been giving a expedited regulatory path by the regulatory authorities, and we only have to do a single phase 3 trial just for safety because with a virus such as MPox or same thing as smallpox, now you're not going to have a placebo controlled arm because that would be unethical. So we'll do a safety study and immunogenicity study, and we'll conduct in monkeys. So the poor monkeys will conduct the efficacy, and that's the tradition of how you do certain viruses. You don't do them in human. You do the same thing if you're dealing with Marburg or one of the Ebola
Hmm.
viruses. Now, those have fatality rates up to 90%. And
Hmm.
so when you do that, you're not about to do a safety efficacy study in humans. You do that in the monkeys, and you test it for safety and immunogenicity, immune responses in the humans. So we'll be starting that work. Right now, we've produced the product under CGMP for clinical use. It's being vialed, so it's being put in the vial. So that's the fill finish. And then we anticipate in the second half of this year, we'll start our clinical trial.
Okay, great. So I'm glad you updated my knowledge. I still thought it was transmitted sexually. That's definitely a little more concerning when it's transmitted from t touch spaces, right?
And it's
Um,
MPox, just so we're not offending monkeys, Chris.
yes, I'm fully
Right.
aware of this.
It still will be transmitted sexually, but the challenge is this strain of it, which you'll see the word clade, CLADE, many times. That's just what scientists say when they really mean a new strain because they want to act sophisticated and smart. But the current strain that we started dealing with last year, which is the one we're still dealing with now, that one is transmitted not only sexual contact but also in casual contact, and that's been the
Mhm.
driver of what's been going on this year and why it's such a concern.
So are most children, because you said you gave the example of a child sleeping in a bed space with an adult with MPox, is it still primary sexual or it's well beyond that? Are those children, were they born of maybe an adult that had MPox or,
They largely are picking it up through some casual transmission. The,
okay.
no, because adults, myself, you look at someone that when I was a child, we got a little scratch on our arm, and that was smallpox vaccine. Well,
Hmm.
children have never had that type. They've never been vaccinated, and so they're exposed to it. And so the adults will contract the virus, and they may not have had the vaccine before, but they can transmit it through bed sheets, pillowcases, a hug. There have been reports where an uncle hugged his nephew niece and
Damn. I knew
transmitted.
I shouldn't have let Chris hug me last time I saw him.
I haven't been to Africa, so I don't think you have much to worry about, Dan.
Listen, before we get into the stuff, because there's a pipeline of things, there's people are interested in certain things related to the stock. I wanted to give the research sites watching, which is a huge component of the audience, just like 3 to 5 more minutes maybe of some advice for them. Are there any studies that you don't have to actually give specifics, but are there any opportunities for research sites to work with GeoVax in the foreseeable future? And if so, and maybe this is a good segue into what's in the pipeline, what therapeutic indications, et cetera, besides MPox, of course.
Sure. Well, we would not be the driver of that because the CROs are responsible, obviously, for picking the sites. Our clinical trial, for instance, for MPox, will have sites in the U.S., in Europe and in Africa, for obvious reasons. No, obviously the latter type thing. The the oncology phase 2 trial that we will be initiating and rolling out over the next year. We've selected the CRO, the protocols being finalized, got to produce product, and all, but that will include sites in, I'll call it US, perhaps North America, which would mean some in Canada, but also in Europe. So the
Okay.
oncology one will be in that, and we haven't announced who we've selected on that, and so I don't want to do it now because then I'd have to put a press release out. So
Yeah,
so
yeah, no.
do that, and then with Elucent has already selected. I mean, they are not selecting any new sites with the COVID-19 studies they're doing for the Project Next Gen, the large BARDA funded trial. That one, there are 80 sites all in the US. They've all been confirmed. They haven't all signed contracts, so some of them may end up, it may,
Mm.
these lawyers get into it and that you may not get a signed contract, you got to
You
pick
may get Chris involved in some of those. He
up.
negotiates for 1/5 of the sites in the United States, I think.
And so there are people who have clinical site facilities. That's their business. And I know of some of those because they have let me know. I didn't reach out to them. I didn't play any role, but some of them have let me know,
Yes.
hey, we're part of one of your programs because we've been hired by your CRO. And
Yes,
that
yes.
didn't come about from us doing that. Just simply was told because I have to
That's
know
me and Chris. That's our business. We own these some of these sites. So just we're gonna move on to the pipeline, but I know there's a CRO and yeah, yeah, they are the ones. But let's say a site reaches out to you on LinkedIn or something, says, David, I watched your podcast, amazing.
that.
Listen, can you consider my site? Like, if you really recommend them, do they jump the line with that CRO, or is it a clear chain of command they gotta follow?
Well, it all depends. If, for instance, under the Project NextGen, the large program, there the CRO was selected, was selected, but it was the one we had in our proposal by BARDA. They're funding they're paying for it directly on our behalf, and that's clearly all run by the CRO. On the other ones, if they're, I would say the way we would handle it, because I very big on this. I don't meddle in other people's. That's why I hire them. Is if I had some, I would forward such an email to our clinical team,
Okay.
and that would be our director of clinical operations and to our the head over infectious disease. So I would send it depending on which one it sort of fit with to
Dan?
them and leave it up to them at that point.
Hello.
So what you're telling me is there is maybe a chance.
Yeah, there's a chance. There's a potential opportunity. There was a colleague I've known for a number of years near where I live that owns a site and has done. I ended up selling it, to a larger company and all. As soon as his time period was up for not, competing, he started another one. And I recommended him. It was at another company, but I forwarded his capabilities. I said, vet him, do whatever you normally do. It's just someone that I know. He seems to have a good business, so it tells me if you have a good business, then that means you must be satisfying your clients. So I sent it to them, and he ended up becoming part of a site. That again, that was a former company, but it was timely when he reached out to me. I forwarded on. I did not recommend it, and I emphasized to them, this is your, this will be your call. If he doesn't perform, you can't point your finger at me and say, I picked him because I didn't pick him. I just said you may want to talk to him.
Gotcha. Chris, look what's on the agenda still for David, all right? We've got their pipeline, which is their phase 2 vaccine candidate, which we discussed. They're working on cancer therapies. There's buzz around Trump's Stargate AI partnership, and there's also um, like a biodefense focus clearly, and I wanted to get your take on RFK and how that impacts GeoVax. But before I get into any of this, Chris, is there anything you still like from a site perspective want to ask David maybe as we shift gears into a more economic
No, I
conversation?
think we've covered that. I would be curious to see how you would have any involvement with Stargate.
Let's do it. All the boss, man.
let me comment one thing.
Yes.
Every biotech CEO I know, and I've talked with there's six vaccines that have been put in this project NextGen. Each one of them are funded similar to what we were funded, about around the same amount. So 10,000 patients, it costs you 10,000 patients. No matter what the program is, the number one complaint of every every CEO when it comes to their clinical thing is the disappointing pace of recruitment and enrollment. And I'm sure, you guys have heard that time and time again. But that is the number one issue when CEOs get together. And I've asked them, I said, what, you're doing a clinical trial, you're doing a phase two, we're doing a phase two. What's your number one issue? And it just is always slower, it's always frustrating. The I've come to the conclusion that the CRO primarily manages the data that comes out in the operational aspects, and it's the people, for instance, such as Yuma Clinical Research, that are
Well,
actually pulling patients in that are the ones, or if it's an academic setting, it's at that medical center that you're doing to pull them in, and that I've come to the conclusion that going forward, any trials we do will have an additional aspect, which is to work very closely with every site that we have, and not leave it up to the CRO.
every thank you for sharing. That's a common theme we're getting from a lot of biotech, whether micro cap, small cap, mid caps. The technology is empowering you guys and gals back to the driver's seat in a way. Because for a few decades, you just complete outsource. We don't know what's going on. Don't know nothing. Then the FDA comes and holds you responsible.
Exactly, it's your baby. Well, and that's part of where AI comes in, because what we're trying to utilize is AI. Not only we're utilizing it in the design of the trials, because we look at, not only when we're talking infectious diseases, we not only look at antibody responses because of the technology we utilize for all of our infectious disease vaccines, the whole cellular immunity or T cell generations, and what are the good. There are not good markers for efficacy or lack thereof in evaluating cellular immunity, as we've all become accustomed to utilizing, and the FDA agrees with the different markers when you're talking antibody or neutralizing antibody responses. So we're utilizing AI in those aspects, because you have to design what types of assays you're going to have. You've got to have the basis for that. That may guide you on how you design the trial. So we're utilizing it for that. We're utilizing it for ways of picking sites. We're asking our CROs to do that, and not just do it out of convenience, who they've done before. So we're looking at in certain, is there a certain distribution of either the cancers we're addressing, or the infectious diseases we're addressing, certain subpopulations that we need to go after. We're developing our COVID-19 vaccine, for instance, specifically to be the preeminent vaccine for people with compromised immune systems. And the reason why is the mRNA vaccine, so the Pfizer, the Moderna, and also the Novavax vaccines for COVID-19 do not work for people who have weakened immune systems, whose bodies no longer mount much of a response to antibody stimulation. Our vaccine actually induces a very strong T cell response, and we have clinical data that shows that it works better in certain populations than, for instance, the Pfizer. The Pfizer vaccine failed, ours worked. So that becomes a very important differentiator. But in designing any clinical trials for that, we need to ensure that we're also looking at where patients with certain subpopulation diseases, where they're located. And again, that gets into all this utilization of AI. Because at the end of the day, how fast you can complete a clinical program, is absolutely critical. And it can take forever for different reasons, or if you can find ways to speed it up. And it isn't just by identifying where to do the trials, but are there elements for certain biomarkers that you can utilize? So we're
Yeah.
very much involved in all those aspects of utilizing AI.
I'm
We
curious about the AI, if I may. So, these tools ultimately become ubiquitous. There's probably a early adopter advantage as far as, I mean, it's probably proportionate to CapEx spending, but Are you using off-the-shelf stuff or just contracting strategically with vendors and providers, or are you guys doing this like in-house?
We are trying, well, we don't, we use some AI in-house to tee certain things up and all, but we don't have the staff to sort of go real deep. So what we have been doing the last 2 years is talking to firms that claim they are AI experts focused on let's say the areas of biotech or life sciences and this and it's as simple as will tell me at the very beginning it was myself and a few other people asking the principals of these firms, all who are very bright, AI oriented people. So, okay, we want to do a clinical trial among these type of patients. Where would AI come in? Tell us what you can do. And then our clinical team and our R&D team are saying, well, we need to look at it because we need to be able to work in conjunction with the FDA and reach agreement on certain biomarkers. Because if you're utilizing a technology as we do that utilizes the cellular immune system as well as the antibody immune system, most vaccines focus almost solely on what they do to the antibody. Well, we're paving new pathways. So we're sometimes in discussions with people about FDA or other regulatory authorities about what to do. Here again, we're utilizing who has that, and we're seeking out guidance literally all over the world. We've just recently established our first footprint in the UK out of the Oxford University area, but it's really our footprint for all of the UK. We have members on our scientific advisory board now. We're talking with groups that are experts in T cell analyses and stuff. They're in the UK. So we're pulling all of that in, and our business model is have people who have sufficient knowledge, experience, and expertise to be able to appropriately manage those activities that we're doing. Otherwise, we're just
Yeah.
dependent on what someone says they can.
I feel like we're getting a glimpse into the future of our industry by analyzing the strategy of these microcaps. Because I mean, you're not going to get the CEO of Eli Lilly on here. I've tried to talk to us about, bringing things in-house, but they're doing it. Do
Sure.
you think, David, it's actually the small caps doing the early innovating, not from the drug discovery, but from processes, and then the big pharma kind of copies, or is it the opposite? Is it vice versa right now?
I think it's a combination of both. Because what the large pharma in my career, I was, I've led at big pharma. I mean, before when Wyeth was the basis that
Mm.
Pfizer acquired that put them into the vaccines. I ran the Wyeth's U.S. pharmaceutical and vaccine business past in my.
My first study in '05 was a Wyeth schizophrenia study. It didn't
So,
work, but yeah, I got my first start as a site owner.
okay. So from those types of programs, what big pharma traditionally does, same thing that they do in their pipeline. Because the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine came from BioNTech, small biotech company out of Germany. They did a deal, brought it in. What did they bring? They brought muscle behind it, investment behind it to drive it through, get it registered, and then had their commercial rights. And BioNTech had Europe, that type of thing. So that's what I would say that traditional pharma has always been good at is because they've got much deeper pockets, great resources, but they've built largely their success, most successful, if I'm not mistaken, over two-thirds of the successful blockbusters that have come out of over the decades out of pharma were picked up by pharma by other people. Gilead's antiviral drugs were not produced out of research and development at Gilead. They actually brought them in from Emory University as
Hmm.
well as Pharmaset and other
Hmm.
companies. Nothing wrong with that. That's what they're good at doing, you see.
Right.
And so what small companies, for instance, the companies that we are working with related to utilizing AI and being able to understand and be able to map out and hopefully together we can all reach agreement with regulatory authorities on what are the appropriate biomarker assays to utilize that give you insight and this is indicating efficacy or this is indicating non-efficacy. that's really being driven by smaller entrepreneurial companies.
Gotcha. And we will now focus on, well, some of the other questions we had was,
Well, before we move to anything
yeah,
else,
go ahead, go ahead.
so you had mentioned that one of the top concerns, of course, for yourself as well as other CEOs is recruitment from sites, right? That's one of the main constraints on finishing your project, um, whatever phase of study that might be. So I've brought this up a few times with other CEOs or higher up execs. What's wrong with designing a study to to kind of spur on sites to recruit more and pay more attention to your study? Because generally the dynamic is sites are going to pay attention to studies or recruit more exclusively for studies that pay well, right? What if you were to design, and you could pass this along to the other CEOs you're speaking with, what if you were to design a study, and some sponsors have done this, I've seen these budgets, in which there is reward for A, completing a patient, or B, meeting a certain step in the study, you get a bonus, right, as a site. I'm telling you, your recruitment numbers would significantly increase in this situation. If you were to say to a site, hey, here's your budget, there is no negotiating this budget. It's 20,000 a completed patient or whatever it might be, which is a reasonably fair budget, but you're going to get double that for each completed patient. So 20,000 a completed patient plus another 20,000 a completed patient. Um, or if they meet a certain midway point that the data is somewhat reasonable for you, it means something for you, even if the patient does drop out. Obviously, the best patients are the completed patients for your data set. What do you think of something like that, David?
One, we've done it before.
And does it help?
Two, it works. Depending if now in some jurisdictions that would be illegal, so we couldn't do it in certain areas in
Mm-hmm.
Europe. You have to be aware of that. Certain, if you're dealing in an area where most of your patient populations are going to be handled out of academic medical centers, which we've had that before, where we're dealing with advanced head and neck cancer patients who, not to try and cure it, but just trying to improve their last stage of life.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain institutional prohibitions in that
Yeah.
instances. They will allow you that you can't carve it out, so it's just driving the patients in there. But you can make contributions and to support the analytical lab at those institutions, that type of thing. So there are different ways that you can do it. If it's a classic, or if it, I don't know if it's a classic, if it's an area and your trial is dealing with, sites or traditional physician offices that also are heavily involved in clinical sites, or if it's a clinical site operation such as yours or others, the ones I've known in the Charleston, South Carolina area, et cetera, those things. There's some here in the low country where I live here. Then you can find ways of supporting it. But again, it can be tricky because if you're doing a mix of that, then you may have some of your sites where you can't do that and other sites where you can.
Mm-hmm.
But I know where I know of some examples where it worked very well and it was laid out. I mean, it had to go through a lot of review and IRB and all that type of stuff, be able to do it. But yes, we had a very disappointing experience where just there were no patients coming in and there was no activity on behalf of the CRO did not see it as their responsibility to do anything except handle as patients came into the trial. And that was when they picked them up. But the key was
Ridiculous.
we got to stimulate and get more patients in here.
I
Yep.
gotta plug patientace.com, but anyways, we can talk about that
So you
another
really have
time.
to So you have to figure out they tried a few things, none of which were successful. But I will say that is the number one. I was at a meeting internationally, and another CEO who also is in this big BARDA trial, the next generation project, next gen out of HHS. I was having dinner with him. So that's one third of the there's six products in that program to the CEO sitting there. And I asked him, I said, what bothers you the most on clinical trials? He said, the pace of patients. I said, amen. I said, it's so frustrating. I get so mad at CROs all the time about that. So,
Yeah, absolutely. There's a
Wait,
number of
I'm just
ways.
curious. Who do you guys get more mad at, though? Just be honest. Sites or CROs? If you had to pick only one.
well, when a CRO pitches, they tell you how they can manage the sites to get your patients.
Gotcha.
I don't make a contract with the sites, as a
Gotcha.
client. Mine are with the CRO.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So my disappointment then goes to the CROs and goes from that regard. And unless what I've said is, and I've done this before at other companies, if you're a larger company and you have a nice MSL, Medical Science Liaison Organization, and you've got to try, you're going to assign those that are in that therapeutic area to be going there much more frequently than the CRAs from the CRO. And I think that's a very important element. But if you're a small biotech company and you're a company of 25 people, then and you're reliant on these others, that's why we do this. We've got people who manage CROs very successfully. They're not pushovers. They do that, but again, you work through that. So it really comes down. I think the most important thing is before you assign the CRO, you have that discussion with them. Now, what is it you're going to do? Because the sites aren't yours. The sites belong to other people. It may be a site company, it may be an academic institutional, but what are you going to do to ensure that there's high awareness and interest and flow? Basically to focus on identifying patients that qualify for this trial and then moving those forward into the process. I
Well,
mean, gotta look.
unfortunately, CROs don't play a huge role in mitigating or helping uh, recruitment. Right? It really boils down to site selection.
Exactly.
Uh, and even then, you can select a great site, many patients for the trial, but then the site itself is making their decisions recruitment wise on really what's the number one driver of most anything, and it's the dollars, right? um if they
Site,
have.
a site company that's got, I don't know, 50 sites around the US, whatever. One of their senior individuals recently said to me, he said, you realize, this is a site company.
Mhm.
He said, you realize CROs make the highest margin when patients aren't coming into the trial because they're still billing you monthly for
Yep.
them to prepare. But they're not expending any money because there's nothing to be done. And I
Yep.
said, exactly what I've been complaining of. That's what I said. And
that's
he confirmed
that's
it.
where as a sponsor you need to play a pivotal role in making sure these budgets align with what the
Exactly.
sites need or want. And really, I've had these conversations with small sponsors many times, and I think that, in my opinion, if you really want to drive recruitment, your budget should be minimal, but should to the sites, right? Initially, and it should be driven based on performance, right? The more patients you can get, the more patients you can keep in the trial, your budget is exponential at that point. But yeah, the CROs, they're not in this for you, they're in it for themselves as well.
I agree.
Yep. And they're going to make bigger dollars if they can delay the onset of patient recruitment. And those dollars really are greater when they're doing minimal work. So they're paying little in salary, and
Exactly right.
they're driving you to pay them for doing much of nothing.
Yeah,
Spoken like the panelist at Save Our Sites financial panel.
Yeah, we're not going to
Interesting.
probably get into that too much, but
SaveOurSites.com. David, your mission seems to align with the biodefense focus of the Trump administrations and figures like RFK. How do you see their health reform ideas impacting GEOVAX, if at all? Chris, I had to do it. We had to get a little spicy on this one.
yeah. No, we before new administration came in, but they had indicated who was hopefully going to be confirmed. No, we looked at where do we align or misalign with these individuals. You see, our technology, for instance, on infectious disease vaccines has been around since about 1970. So there's no surprises here. And there's been quite a bit of discussions, and a lot of individuals, have had questions, concerns about mRNA. Has it been fully vetted? It's a new technology. It was rushed through. All those things people say. And I don't know what the truth is there because that's not my job. I focus on GEOVAX. But what I do know is that we have a technology that is well recognized around the world for being exquisitely safe. It does not replicate in humans, which means it has minimal to no risk of a person getting a vaccine from a infectious disease vaccine, be it COVID, be it the Ebola vaccine, be it a Zika virus, whatever it is. They are exquisitely safe. In fact, we've been granted exemptions by regulatory authorities, including the FDA, to not have to conduct some of the traditional animal toxicology studies to show that something is going to be safe because it's so inherently safe. So we looked at that and we said that's a plus for us. And that ties in with all this biosecurity also, because in biosecurity, they're looking that the number one threat is smallpox, which now we get back into our vaccine that we talked about, MPox, because it's the same vaccine. And we utilize that same technology for every infectious disease vaccine, which means our COVID-19 vaccine inherently also conveys protection against MPox. So if someone in Africa, where they're highly exposed to MPox, gets our COVID-19 vaccine, they're not getting two vaccines, but our technology conveys the benefit of also preventing MPox. So
Hmm.
we align well with that. And whether or not it's an Ebola vaccine, we had a publication in 2007 that showed that our HIV vaccine, which was tested among the monkey version of it, it conveyed 100% protection against mpox for those same patients, call them in that type of thing. So we think we align well with that. Another one on so the areas of biosecurity, they're interested in vaccines that prevent smallpox, which is also mpox, for same product does that. They look at the hemorrhagic fever. That's the Ebola, Sudan, Zaire, and Marburg. We've developed vaccines for that, all of which have gone all the way through non-human primate studies and have shown up to 80% efficacy in that. So we align well with that. We know that that fits with what they're doing. So we believe our technology is one that doesn't open us up to criticism, questions, and stuff because it's been around and everybody recognizes it. Our focus in biosecurity, I serve on the bio organization, on their biodefense policy steering committee. I serve on the vaccine policy steering committee. We're very active on that. So in those areas, we think we line up very well. We have a new manufacturing process that will be utilized for any infectious disease vaccine that is based upon the technology we use, which is also used again for mpox, smallpox, and all these other areas. And today, the way that type of technology is manufactured is very slow and cumbersome. Ours is going to be a game changer. We've demonstrated that it gives a yield tenfold what the current technology does, produces faster and at lower cost. So we're also working very heavily with the Africa CDC and the Africa Vaccine Initiative so that they can become self-sufficient. Today they can't because that technology it does not exist on the African continent. And with our new manufacturing process that we're advancing, it's not here yet, but it is in process development. So we're making some progress on. We'll be able to work closely with the African continent through Africa CDC, the Africa Vaccine Initiative, all of whom we're in touch with today, WHO and others. And our goal is to help them become self-sufficient. So that ties in again with the current administration and the big focus. And I always point out that one of the crowning achievements of the first Trump administration was Operation Warp Speed. And this Project NextGen that we're part of, although it was rolled out under the Biden administration, it's the natural next stage because it is intended to overcome the deficiencies that we've learned about in the first generation vaccines. They don't last that long, so we need greater lasting power. Our vaccine currently is lasting twice as long as mRNA. It lasts 3 to 6 months. We're lasting 8 to 12. We cover these variants before they even emerge from COVID-19. That's not the case with the mRNA, and ours works for patients with weak immune systems and the others don't. So I think we align to our, it doesn't mean we'll always agree because we never will, with everything that comes out of any administration, but we do think that we're well positioned to work with whoever is in leading the current administration from an HHS standpoint.
Now, many would disagree with you on that warp speed. I'm not sure I agree with it or disagree, honestly. Obviously, in a dire situation, we need to really move quickly. I
Mhm.
just don't know how dire COVID really was.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole different issue. But
Right,
at the
right.
time, the point is that the quickest, it traditionally was 10 to 15 years to develop a vaccine.
Yep.
Fast as any clinical program led to registration was 5 years. And in 10 months, they got vaccines out there with the shortcomings that we all acknowledge today, in the questions that people may still have. Okay, they're there, but it did sort of halt what I would say was the tsunami of SARS-CoV-2 that was occurring. It seemed to be everywhere. So, but they're not perfect, and that's why I think the next stage is what we're part of now, which is to address both their inability to protect against continuous emerging variants, low durability or lasting power, and then also addressing the needs for populations who don't respond to the current vaccine. So that's what I'm focused on.
Okay. Okay. Before we transition to something entirely off this topic base, do you have any closing thoughts on GeoVax or?
No, not really. I think again, I think we, for people who look at us as an investment, I think it's a worthy, compelling consideration. I would urge people to do their own due diligence and look at it. I think we're in areas that differentiate us. Every product we're working on, we believe has an opportunity for an expedited registration path, assuming the products have legs on them and that type of thing. And so from that standpoint, and we continue to be able to finance the company to move things forward.
David, any catalyst, teasers, maybe things investors can look forward to, any big updates you have in mind, or maybe
Uh-huh.
on the schedule for 25?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have on our website, we have a corporate presentation. It actually shows what the milestones are we've laid out that will update people. But it's all on these three programs from the COVID-19 program, Project Next Gen, and those. We highlight what we think will be coming out and the timing of those things. For the MPox vaccine, again, we expect that to go into the clinic in the second half of this year and to move forward from there. And in the oncology, again, right now we've selected the CRO. We haven't announced yet who it is, but we've selected the CRO. We're working to manufacture the product, and then we'll be looking probably more than likely in 2026 to actually initiate that clinical trial. Some likelihood it could happen this year, but I personally believe it'll be in early 2026. But that'll be a phase 2 trial and a very important one. And then on this new manufacturing process, we're in process development, and we expect to be giving some updates of our progress on that throughout the remaining quarters of this year in
And
each
I
one.
saw I saw you're on a webinar coming up in 2 days. Is that a
Webinar on Thursday, yes.
You're out there working, David.
You guys,
Excellent. You're the
thank you.
people CEO. The people demand a CEO like this that's retail investor focused. Is not just for the big institutions, for you guys and gals. Chris,
All right.
I know
So
you're
we
itching at this, man.
we were told, David, that you had a music background of at least some sort. Can you tell us a little bit about
Uh-oh.
that? I
It's
asked for a reason.
somewhat embarrassing, but
Can you yodel?
like many people growing up in the 60s when the mop heads came, we all
Mop heads. Wait,
yeah,
wait, mop heads. I never heard that expression.
Beatles,
So
Beatles,
you
yeah.
mean the hippies, right?
Oh, pre-hippies, the Beatles.
Oh,
So
okay. Mop
anyway,
heads. All right.
I became I always liked music, but I was a
Well, were you a mop head?
yeah.
All
That's
right. All right.
we had a band called the Statics, out of Atlanta, Georgia. We um, never, I mean, again, it was in the 60s, and we did our gigs and played. And, I was a rhythm guitarist and vocalist, and sometimes organ chorus, that type of thing for certain songs. So it was the usual. There were five of us in the band, and one went to a major one that won Grammys, and also our drummer no longer with us, unfortunately, but his nickname was Sticks. He was quite good, and he ended up later on, playing with a major band and was their drummer that won a Grammy. So good for
What
him.
I
what
bet that
band?
shit slapped back in the days
Well,
too.
yeah, sure, Dan. What
No,
band?
serious.
He
What
was
band?
swinging medallions.
Swinging Medallions. I don't think I've ever heard of that.
Wow.
So,
Double shot of my baby's love.
okay, very
That would
nice.
have been so fitting if there was somehow an MPox song back then that would like foreshadow the future. But I mean, that would be like so cool. But
Yeah,
there's no way that was possible.
So,
yeah.
so was this what kind of music genre was it? I assume rock or
Yeah,
similar to
rock and
Beatles.
roll and and also soul, out of Detroit and all.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
Okay.
So
So,
it
uh,
was the 60s, it was the mid 60s. So it was
absolutely, absolutely. So,
Walker and the All Stars, all those things.
so Dan and I like to put on these podcasts we like to put the guest on the spot and ask them top of mind what music are you listening to right now, or something you don't think Dan and I would have heard, um, that's top of mind for you. If you can't think of anything, we could play something for you
Yeah,
to react to.
I I don't listen to a lot of music because I
Wait. You were in a music group, so
well,
you
I can tell you,
definitely
I'm
you're
looking at my collection right now, and I've got Chuck Berry, I've got Gordon Lightfoot, Johnny Rivers, I've got Otis Redding, I've
Ah,
got
I know
those are
two of those people.
I know
yes,
all of them. I listened to all of them.
yeah. And so I've got them. I've got the um, what's their name? I'm trying to think. I can't think of. I just went blank on them. The Animals. I've got those over there. So basically, it spans, that type of genre.
Okay. Well, and I may get the name wrong. Um, Buffalo Soul. What is their name? There's a song.
Buffalo Springfield.
Yes, their big hit is. It's really been. I've been listening to it a lot lately, for what it's worth. Um, so yeah, I'm into that kind of music as well. So there's nothing top of mind for you in terms of like a
No,
song.
no. Rolling Stones. I mean, they're still around, kicking out of the grave. I like that. We played their music. So
So give us a song you wouldn't mind reacting to right now.
Satisfaction.
Oh,
Citizen
great song. That was
Cafe,
Dan. Have
uh,
you heard the song "Satisfaction" by the Rolling Stones? You had to
Yeah, I think everyone and they mama have.
have.
Maybe pick one
And
that
their
like,
mama, huh?
yeah, maybe pick one that.
Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones. We
Another
played.
good one.
No,
Definitely
no,
a good one.
let's go more left field,
Beatles.
like more left field, like less popular.
Yeah. Most of them, well, we wrote our own song. It was called Pain. That was one we played in the Battle of the Bands in Atlanta. So
Is that on YouTube?
no, no, no.
Oh,
There was
okay.
back then.
So what Dan's asking for is something kind of not mainstream, right? That would be on YouTube. You got anything? You have anything?
Nothing of us, no, because it was so long ago. We're talking 50 plus years ago.
Well, not necessarily you, just any group.
Something me or Chris
Well,
would like, you
well, if
think?
you could go out there and all these songs, um, I'm trying to think of the type of song, Junior Walker and the All Stars. And also, Wait
Do
Till the
you,
Midnight Hour. That was one there.
okay, so you're a musician, maybe not a current musician, but formerly a musician. Do you happen to like any more modern day music?
Not really. I mean, I really don't listen to when the little bit when I'm driving is usually it's a long drive from where I live to go to where our company is, which is 300 miles. So I listen to podcasts going and coming when I'm.
Okay,
Oh, there's a good one called
Dan,
Random Musings from the Clinical Trials. I think